What's the scariest thing that you've seen, but no one believes you? Story 1. I was 15 years old. I was in LA for a convention and a Disneyland trip. There was a large group of us. My best friend and I were sitting next to each other on the bus. As we were driving from the airport, both my friend and I watched two people exit this house on the corner. One started to run, and the other pulled a pistol out and shot him down. Then shot him again. We both looked at each other thinking, holy crap. We told some adults on the trip, and they told us we hadn't seen that, and that it never happened. Update. It was February 16th, 2005. Our flight left at 3-something in the morning, the flight not being long from Northern California. When we got on the bus, big like a Greyhound, from the airport, everyone fell asleep. It was still dark out. My best friend and I weren't tired. The gunshots weren't loud. I grew up around guns. The two adults we told were not our parents, but chaperones. They acted like we were crazy, but we know what we saw. To this day, I feel like they were clueless adults. No iPhones. We took all our pictures for the trip on disposable cameras and Nikons. We were headed to the LA Religious Education Congress Youth Day. We weren't religious, but went for the Disneyland trip. We got to miss school and go to Disneyland. It seemed worth sitting through a day of stuff we had no attachment to. I have since researched murders throughout the area and haven't found a thing. Story 2. About a year ago, I was up watching movies late at night when I got hungry and went downstairs for a snack. My room is across from my daughter's room, and her door was open. As I was coming back upstairs, I started turning left towards my room when I heard, clear as ever, "Daddy, can you close the door?" I turned around, didn't say much, and just closed it. Once I was back in my room, I lay down to watch TV when it hit me. My daughter isn't there. She's spending the night at my parents'. I got up and went to her room, and sure enough, it was empty. I woke up my wife, and she thought I was crazy. She said I was probably tired, and maybe it was the TV. I remember the voice so clearly, and coming from the direction of her room. It's very possible that it was just my mind playing games, but it definitely made me question a few things. Story 3. My wife and I were driving up through northern Arizona on Highway 89, between Flagstaff and Page. It was about 1 a.m., as we were on third shift at the time and often drove at night to avoid traffic. I saw a few sets of eyes glowing in my headlights a little ways up the road, so I let off the gas, slowing down to avoid hitting an animal in the road. When we drove by, we saw several dogs, coyotes, on the side of the road, and I hit the gas and drove by. After we passed, my wife said one of them was running next to the car, and I looked over and saw it as well, probably 20 feet off the shoulder of the road. I floored it and looked over, and it stood up on its hind legs, that's the only way I can describe it, and kept pace with us for a couple of seconds before turning away from the road and disappearing. This whole event probably lasted no more than 10 seconds, but it was seriously the most terrifying 10 seconds of my life. This was probably 20 years ago, and we still rarely talk about it. Story 4. About 4 years ago now, I was at work late dealing with some closing issues. It took longer than usual, so I ended up being the last to leave. It was pretty late, around 8 p.m. My place of work isn't in the middle of nowhere, nor is it in a bad part of town. It's in a normal, nice area, but it is usually abandoned after 7 p.m. When I got outside, I hopped in my car and prepared to pull out into the street. As I stopped and looked both ways, I suddenly noticed two figures standing to my left on the sidewalk. The thing is, they were both dressed in whitish bodysuits from head to toe, and were rapidly approaching my car, as in, headed straight for the driver's door with little room to mistake their intent, whatever the end goal might have been. I floored the gas and turned down the street as fast as I could. My mirror showed them both moving my way on foot, which alarmed me since I live in the nearby neighborhood, barely a 5-minute walk from there. I didn't think beyond getting home and locking the door. Nobody else was on the street, near the parking lot, or anything. My town isn't known for dangerous types or strange incidents, but that experience terrified me. 2 strangers in head-to-toe bodysuits? It wasn't Halloween, and they looked extremely suspicious, but nobody else saw them. Story 5. One time, our family dog ran away. He was super shy and scared very easily. We got him from an animal testing lab. So we gathered all friends and family we could get our hands on, and shortly after he bailed, there were numerous search parties, altogether about 24 people, looking for him. After a whole day of searching without any sign of the dog, the sun was setting slowly. I was standing on the edge of the forest, where I searched and called for the whole day, and suddenly saw a deer just 15 meters from me staring directly into my eyes. We stared at each other for at least a minute, no movement and no sound. Then I asked in a soothing voice, "Did you happen to come across a lost beagle?" I swear to God, to this day, the deer nodded and looked down on the ground where it was standing. Then it jumped away into the woods. I was thinking to myself that I just imagined that nod, and that the dog could not be sitting next to the deer without making any noise. But I couldn't not check. And yes, there he was, sitting in the exact spot, scared to death and shaking with fear. I gasped and cuddled the dog, took him into my arms, and looked into the woods where the deer disappeared. There it was again, staring at me, directly in the eyes. I had tears of joy and was unbelievably grateful while at the same time confused beyond belief. Since that day, I have never eaten deer again. Story 6. When I was about 15 years old on a school night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I remember looking at the clock. It was about 1:30 a.m. I went to the kitchen to make some hot tea to take back to bed with me. Now, our kitchen was attached to the dining room, which was a step down from the kitchen. The kitchen and the dining room both had large sliding glass doors and big windows facing the backyard, all on the same wall. The cabinets and counter where we kept the tea were opposite the wall of windows, and it made a little corner. I remember walking into the kitchen with the lights off, going to the tea corner of the kitchen, and then standing in the corner looking at the windows and sliding glass doors. I felt like someone was watching me through them. I got that gut feeling. You know the one. I stood there for about a minute, very still, like maybe they wouldn't see me if I didn't move. Then I went back to my room, without making the tea. When I got back to my room, the clock read 5 a.m. I had been standing in the kitchen for 3.5 hours, and I had no idea how that was possible, because it only felt like maybe a minute. To this day, it is still the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. My mom never believed me when I told her because she never felt anything bad in our house. I never did either, but that night I absolutely did. Story 7. I was once waiting for the metro in Shanghai and saw a woman in tears frantically run past. She stopped dead in her tracks and seemed to be searching for a train on either platform, but there was none coming. She was yelling something, but I didn't speak the language, so I don't know what. She then ran into the nearby bathroom. About 30 seconds later, 2 men in ordinary clothes came barreling down the escalator. They were shouting, but again, I don't know what. They began walking up and down the track yelling, and then went into the bathroom where the woman was seemingly hiding. A few seconds later, they emerged, dragging the woman away. She was screaming, crying, and fighting like crazy to get away from them. The men just kept screaming back at her, shaking her violently and striking the back of her head while they forcibly carried her up the stairs. Everyone on the platform just gawked, mouths agape, but no one did a thing. And then, mere seconds later, the entire scene was over, and people were back to staring at their phones as if whatever had just happened didn't exist. Story 8. My sister saw something on several occasions throughout our lives. I never actually saw anything, only heard something extremely vividly. Basically, one night everything was happening like usual. My mom was out with her friends watching some game, and my dad was watching a movie with my sister and me. It was a comedy, so we all went to bed laughing about it. I was lying in bed about half an hour after we were tucked in, reading a book. I heard somebody stomping down the hallway downstairs and then full-on sprinting up the stairs. I figured it was just my sister coming back from getting a drink or something, but I would have seen her leave her room because our doors are right beside each other, and the staircase is just around the corner. So then I figured it was just my mom coming back home and for some reason being extremely loud. The way my door is angled lets me see anybody who comes up the stairs, so I was watching and waiting as they seemed to be in quite a hurry. The footsteps were getting higher and higher up the stairs, but as soon as they got to the top, they completely stopped. There was nothing. My eyes were still totally fixed on the hallway as I got up to check who it was. I turned the corner, and there was nobody. I immediately got covered head to toe with goosebumps and tried to piece together what could have happened. Not even 2 seconds later, I heard my sister screaming, and she came bolting out of her room with complete terror on her face. Without hesitating, we ran into our dad's room, where he was already standing up and asking what was wrong. My sister pointed back to her room crying and said, "There's a man." My dad rushed into the hall, turned the light on, and then turned the light on in her room. He checked the closet and behind everything but didn't find anything. Then he walked into my room and did the same, but still found nothing. We spent the next 15 or so minutes holding his hand as he searched the rest of the house, flicking every single light on. He called my mom to see if she had been home, but she said she was still with her friends. I could even hear the loud bar atmosphere through the phone speaker. We all slept in my dad's room that night. Over the course of the next 7 or so years, my sister ran out of her room crying about the same man in her room. She said he just stands there in the corner and watches her. She described him as a very tall man in a top hat and a trench coat. "Like a detective," she said. Everything completely black. It was a couple of years after that I stumbled upon what's known as the Top Hat Demon, or the Phantom Hat Man. It turns out it's an actual phenomenon. Every description and drawing is exactly what she described that day. Story 9. I was about 4 years old, visiting my great-grandmother in New Jersey. She made a bed for me to sleep on in the living room. I fell asleep easily, but at some point, I woke up and saw my great-grandfather. He sat on the edge of my bed, smiled, patted my leg, and got up. He put his jacket on and walked out the front door. He had been dead for longer than I had been alive, and I had never met him. Adults the next morning all laughed at the silly kid with a big imagination. At Grandma's request, I described exactly what he was wearing. Flannel shirt, suspenders, khaki pants. Generic description of any grandpa for the last 100 years. Everyone was still giggling at my cute story. But when I got up to show her how he snatched his jacket from the hook by the door and slung it on in one motion, I turned around smiling, only to see her completely pale-faced, with tears running down her cheeks. Everyone got really quiet, and we never talked about it again. She knew I had seen him. No one else's opinion matters. Story 10. I was working at a bakery on third shift, 8 p.m., 4 a.m., at the local orchard. The store closed at 8, but it wasn't unheard of for the owners to come in after closing. I had been working there for about a week at this point. I was out stocking the shelves, so it was close to the end of our shift, probably around 3 a.m. I turned to take something off the rack, and there was a man standing by the cold case. He was late 40s, early 50s, bald, thin, average build, wearing a red flannel shirt tucked into jeans. He said, "Hello, how are you?" I said, "Hi. I'm doing well. How are you?" He said, "I'm fine, thank you." I put the bread on the shelf and turned to ask who he was or introduce myself, and he was gone. I was only turned for a few seconds, so there's no way he could have left my line of sight without me seeing some part of him leaving. And I never heard any doors open or close to indicate that he left or went elsewhere in the store. I told my mom when I got home because I was like, what if someone broke in? Do I want to work at a place where people can just easily waltz in undetected? She asked me about it, and I told her it was weird because he was just standing there looking at a covered-up cold case, so he couldn't see what was actually in it, and he didn't seem like he was trying to steal anything. She told me it was probably just the owner. I met the owner a few days later. He was not the man that I saw there a few nights prior. It wasn't anyone that worked there. I had heard from co-workers that the owner was still working there because his son, who was supposed to take over the business, had died of cancer. That night after work, I went home and looked up the son's obituary online, and I swear it was the guy I saw in the store. Story 11. I lived in an old house in a small town growing up, and there were quite a few strange things that happened while my family was there. The first thing I remember being creepy about that place is waking up in the middle of the night when I was 6 years old, having to pee really bad. I climbed down from the top of the bunk bed and turned to see an old man in a rocking chair sitting by the door. I tried to wake my sister up in the bottom bunk, but she wouldn't wake up, and I remember her being almost like dead weight. I gathered up the courage to run by the man and out the door and fell asleep in the bathroom with the light on and got in trouble with my mom in the morning. My dad also told us that he thought there was something wrong with the place because he kept hearing kids playing and laughing when he would get ready for work in the morning. He woke up around 4 a.m. for work and would leave at 5:30. He told my mom that he heard laughing around the corner of the kitchen in the hallway one morning and went to see if it was one of us kids. Once he turned to the hall, he saw a glimpse of someone running around the far corner to the living room. He followed this kid running until he was back to the kitchen. When he checked our rooms, we were all sound asleep. My mom also said that she would sometimes see someone staring at her out of the corner of her eye if she was alone. Knowing all of this, when we were older, we would try to scare our friends that came over. One day, my friend brought her Furby. This was the late 90s, and we were playing with it in the bedroom. It started acting weird, sounding messed up like the batteries were draining. It shut off with its eyes closed and wouldn't respond anymore. I said to my friend that we had batteries downstairs we could get. As we were leaving the room with the Furby in hand, it suddenly popped its eyes open and said, "Hee hee, I tricked you." And we just screamed and dropped it. Story 12. One time I was working at a used car dealer. On the side lot, there was this huge sliding door that led to the car bays to work on them. One night, I got off really late. I dropped off some cars at an auction, picked up another, and had to drop it off before going home. It's almost 10 at night. It's dark and quiet on the street. I look toward the side gate and see under the sliding door and above the door lights and shadows. They look like people are dancing and moving around. I start walking toward it, and I hear voices like a party is going on back there. It's really weird because the building setup wouldn't allow lights or shadows from nearby buildings to cast lights or shadows there. So I get closer to take a look. I go by a rectangle about 4 inches by 5 inches. It's cut out to be able to reach in and unlock the gate and lock up. I look in, and it's pitch black and totally silent. How it should be. I take a few steps back and away from the hole, and again I see the lights and shadows and the talking and everything. I go near the hole again and again. It's totally pitch black. I go to my car and start driving away and see the lights and shadows again. I told my boss to check the cameras. He said he didn't see anything, but he did see my shadow under the door when I walked by to check it. Story 13. It's not that people don't believe me. It's more that I hardly believe it myself. It was late, probably between 1 and 3 a.m., and I was sitting at an intersection waiting for the light to go green. Across from me was a dark road with trees on either side, and thick woods off to the left, and houses off to the right. So I'm sitting there listening to music, when I see something move at the edge of the woods to the left. Now, this is rural New Jersey, so things moving in the woods are either bears or deer, which aren't scary, but deer will mess your car up if they run out in front of you. I turned my high beams on to see what it was, but they didn't reach the woods. Then I saw more movement before the light turned green. I made my left turn and drove off, but I couldn't see what it was. The next day, I drove the same route on my way to work. And when I got to that intersection, there were cops and an ambulance over at the edge of the woods, where I saw the movement the night before. I asked a co-worker what happened, and he said they had found dismembered body parts there early that morning. Story 14. I was driving with my girlfriend through Wisconsin on the way back home. It was really late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. My GPS ended up putting me on a small highway instead of the expressway right away after leaving there. But I didn't want to complicate things more, so I just followed it. My girlfriend was sleeping, so I had the radio off and drove in silence on this really dark, creepy highway. There were deer crossing signs, so I was driving extra cautiously because a family friend had recently hit a deer in their truck, which did quite a number on it, and also caused her to break her arm from the impact. I saw there was a pretty sharp curve coming up, so I slowed down to make it carefully. And as I'm turning, I see a figure exiting the darkness of the woods. It's a large mountain lion with blood stains all over the front of its face. Scared the life out of me. I pulled up just after the turn and tried to wake my girlfriend up. I could see its large shadow making its way across the road in my rearview mirror, but by the time my girlfriend woke up, it was gone. She had lived in Wisconsin most of her life, and immediately dismissed my claims that it was a mountain lion because they are not really from that area. I told her I know what I saw, but she insisted that I was seeing things. I acted like she was probably right and continued the trip back, but I know what I saw. Story 15. I was deer hunting with a friend on some property my uncle owns in a pretty remote area. It is right off of a main road, with only a couple of trailer homes along the side. And to get to the tree stand, it's a good 20 minutes walking up and down hills through some thick forest. Let me try to paint a little bit of a picture here to make this easier to explain. At the base of the last hill is our 2-person tree stand for hunting. Then there is about 100 feet of land to the lake. But this part is pretty thin, about 60 feet, creating a peninsula jutting from the land to our left, with the rest of the lake behind it. So, about 45 minutes before the sun rises, we start to hear knocking sounds from the tip of the peninsula that sound a lot like male deer fighting with their antlers. We start getting pretty excited, thinking, heck yeah, there's at least 2 bucks out there. Then we hear the knocking coming from the other end of the peninsula as well. Well, that's crazy. We have 4 male deer here? The knocking goes on for a few minutes, getting a little closer. Then we realize it is way too precise to be deer fighting. Then I notice that when the one on the right clicks once, the other clicks once. When one clicks twice, the other clicks twice. They're directly mimicking each other. This couldn't have been an echo. They were spaced out a little far apart. It wasn't instant like an echo would be, and they were both about the same in volume. Over the next few minutes, the knocking sounds get closer and closer together. Then, for about 10 minutes, nothing. When out of nowhere we hear something like an animal on the peninsula dying, almost like a hurt dog yelping. Then we hear a loud thud, and all goes quiet. We look at each other, not sure what to say. I stand up and scream, "Who's out there?" Then I hear the most blood-curdling, awful noise that I have ever heard in my life. I'm shaking right now just thinking about it. It started as a low, deep growl and turned into a high, raspy howl, and my blood instantly went cold. My friend and I look back at each other saying, "What was that?" at the same time. So I yell again, something like, "You better get out of here." Whatever it was howls one more time and takes off through the woods, and I swear I could feel its footsteps. Whatever it was bipedal. I've taken many tracking and hunting classes. I grew up in the woods. I know what a running deer sounds like. This 100% had 2 legs. Then it crashed through some cattails on the edge of the lake. And through the forest, it was winter, so no leaves. We could see them moving, and see how fast it moved through probably a foot of mud and cattails. We didn't say a word. We got down one at a time while the other was pointing their gun where we heard the noises and walked out of there backward. We left, called everyone we knew, but as college-age kids, none of our friends were up. Nobody believed us. So I wanted to go back that afternoon and see if I could find any tracks in the mud where we saw it run. My friend wouldn't go with me, so I went alone. When I got to the cattails on the peninsula, something else had already come back before me. A large branch had wiped all of the footprints from the mud and was laying next to them in the woods. I've been back maybe twice since then. It's been about 5 years. I'm always armed, and I'm always with someone else. Story 16. When I was in El Salvador, we went to visit my grandpa up in the mountains there. There were a lot of rumors that a dried-up stream next to my grandpa's house was haunted, and that you could hear the cries of the dead, and see the devil walk there at night. I didn't think much of it. That day we had left really late from the city, and to get there we had to walk, because there weren't many roads to drive. So we finally made it, and it was about 2 in the morning. My grandpa was about to open the door to the house, and we turned off the lamps. My eyes were getting used to the darkness, and you could see the stream. It was dried up, so you could see the rocks and the mountains because of the moonlight. Anyway, I'm just looking around, and I suddenly see this figure by a tree, and I'm thinking, it's probably a drunk guy. But then, that thing did something. It stood up tall and was blacker than the night itself, and it started doing some sort of movement from left to right. I couldn't believe it, so I touched my cousin and told him, "Hey, do you see that by the tree?" And he was like, "Whoa," and flashed the light. There was nothing there. Throughout that night, I felt uneasy. I fell asleep, and later that morning around 5 a.m., a bunch of crows were making noise, and what sounded like hooves hitting rocks on the stream. I started crying. I was really young. The houses there are made of clay and tree trunks, so sometimes you can see through the walls, and that night traumatized me. My grandpa, through all this, was acting strange, trying to reassure me nothing was wrong, but it was really suspicious because he slept with a rifle next to him. Story 17. I'm returning from an extensive Reddit break to share this. In college, I was hanging in a friend's room when he said he and his roommate needed to go move their cars to different lots, a 45-minute process. I decided to stay and watch some TV. A few minutes after they left, I saw a DVD in a clear case labeled Mausoleum. I remember watching the creepiest movie I've seen to date. British, rough scenes, werewolves, mental asylums, a soundtrack like a haunted calliope, shifts in perspective and time periods, present, then back to the 1700s, shot entirely in black and white, grotesque human sacrifice scenes, horrific death scenes, actors speaking directly to the camera for long monologues, a scene of a serial killer explaining who his next victims would be and why, which really shook me, and repeated colored cutaways to flowers blooming and wilting atop headstones. I shut off the movie before it was done, got up, and realized it was daylight. Both my friend and his roommate had returned. I woke them up and they asked how I got inside. Said I hadn't been there when they returned, didn't answer my cell. Went to take the DVD out of the player and it was empty. They claimed they had never heard of or seen it. I have spent decades trying to make sense of this, have endured nightmares and occasional flashbacks. I have brought it up in therapy to no avail. Has anyone else seen or heard of this, I presume, indie movie? Or experienced something like this? Story 18. I was working at a convenience store, late shift. Just about nobody comes in from about 10:45 until we close at midnight. The way the store is set up is, from behind the counter, I'm about 6 feet from the door in front of me, and to my left, and directly above it are 2 security monitors. It's a very small store. The monitors flip through a few different camera angles, in the back, just outside the front door, in the lot, in the shed, by the coolers, and then repeat the cycle again. I'm working by myself, just me and my phone. 11 o'clock hits, nobody comes in for a while, probably 20 minutes of silence. Some time passes, and I glance at the security monitor. It's showing the angle of the lot, and it's angled so that you could see someone's back as they enter the front door. It's pretty dark out, so the best way to see if a customer's coming is to watch the cameras. It's at a slight delay, so I would see something happen on the monitors a second or two after it actually happened. When the angle from the lot comes back on, I see a man, from behind, enter the front door. Black guy, not too tall, leather jacket. He's got a grocery bag in his right hand. I glance down at the front door, which is just below the monitors. Nobody's there. I thought it was a glitch, maybe an old tape replaying. I watched through another cycle of the camera angles, which lasts about 45 seconds or so, just to see if it would happen again. Halfway through the cycle, the door swings open, and into the store steps a young man, black guy, not too tall, wearing a leather jacket. He's holding a grocery bag in his right hand. The icing on the cake was that he didn't buy anything. He just looked around for a minute and left. Mind playing tricks on me, I guess, but I was spooked out of my mind. Didn't work any more nights after that. Story 19. I've told this story a few times to friends. It never ceases to give me goosebumps. My sophomore year of high school, my girlfriend and I were headed to the school dance. We lived in a small Texas town. For reference, my graduating class was 120. She had picked me up. I was 15 at the time, so still not driving, and we had gotten dinner. The meal went by faster than we had expected, so we had about an hour to kill. We were driving on the back roads near her house, and she told me she had found the perfect makeout spot. Of course, at the time, my hormonal brain didn't think about how illegal or dangerous it was to trespass in the middle of nowhere. We pulled into a driveway, or what used to be one. The road was gravel for about 40 feet, and then turned to dirt. The dirt road was extremely overgrown with grass and appeared to have not been used in years. There was a field to the left of us and a densely wooded area to the right. 3 large gravel piles were between us and the woods. When she pulled in, she pulled the car around to face the exit. Such a trivial thing, yet it made all the difference. She shut the car off and we hopped into the back seat, quickly getting down to business. About an hour goes by and we're about ready to hit the road. While we're getting dressed, she looks at me and says, "I really have to pee." At this point, my hormones were under control, and I realized just how sketchy this place was. It's pitch black, the car is off, and all of our doors are unlocked. Right now. We're in the middle of nowhere. She was a stubborn girl, which might have had something to do with why we're not together anymore. I see her reaching for the door handle. I've had a few cinematic moments in my life, but the way that she reached for the door is something I'll never forget. Her hand moved so slowly, it was as if she was waiting for something to happen. Just as her fingertips touched the handle, a crisp knocking noise came from the back of the car. It was most certainly the sound of knuckles tapping against the top of the trunk. Keep in mind, there were no trees or anything that could have been making this noise on the car. It was a perfect rhythm of knuckles on metal for about 10 seconds. My girlfriend and I sat dead still, holding on to each other, neither of us even breathing. After the longest 10 seconds of my life, the knocking stopped. Dead silent. I attempted to look out the window to see if I could see anyone or anything, but I could hardly even see my girlfriend's face right in front of mine. "What was that?" she asked me. "I don't know. Start the car." My hands were trembling, and I could hear the fear in my own voice. "Babe, please start the car," I asked again. "I can't move," she replied. The second she was quiet, the knocking started again, the same rhythmic beating that I can still remember perfectly. I had had enough. In the course of the next 3 seconds, I was able to jump in the front seat, start the car, lock the doors, turn on the headlights, and put my seatbelt on. Because safety first. I floored that Toyota Corolla like I was a NASCAR driver. I hit about 50 on the turn out of that driveway, spewing gravel on whatever was behind me. I drove like a madman for about 2 miles down the road and stopped at an electric plant down the road. My girlfriend got out to use the bathroom, and I sat in the front seat, my whole body still shaking. I got dressed, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. That was the first time I had driven a car outside of a parking lot. Once we got to the dance, we sat in the corner. Funnily, I have no idea what we even said to each other about it. I just knew that I was never going back to that place. Or so I thought. Near the end of the dance, one of my best friends came up to me, and I explained to her what had happened. "We've got to go back." I couldn't believe my ears. After all that, and this girl wanted to check it out. The next day around noon, she came and picked me up. We went back to the spot, and if she didn't believe me the night before, she definitely did now. I got a good look at the spot, just as I remembered it the night before, but now I could really see just how secluded it really was. There were no houses or buildings within sight of this place. Where that driveway once went was certainly not there anymore. I walked up to where the tire marks were from the night before, still fresh in the gravel. I grimaced as I noticed boot prints leading up to the back of the marks. 2 prints side by side, right behind the back left tire. The prints came and returned to the overgrown brush. My friend could tell I was pretty uncomfortable, so we decided to head out. A couple of months went by, and my girlfriend and I broke up over unrelated matters. We attend different colleges now, but sometimes she will come and visit some high school friends that attend my school. I saw her last semester. We caught up for a while, just about life and all that good stuff. During a lull in the conversation, I asked, "Do you ever think about that time?" She put her hand up, smile gone from her face. Story 20. There's this place called Apple Hill. It's a popular local attraction in the valley. Basically, a cute little family destination. You go there to pick apples and stuff. I went there with my family when I was 11. My cousins, my sister, and I were busy picking raspberries or something. We made it like a competition. Who could get the most berries? We were pretty spread out. It wasn't long before I was fairly far away from all the other berry pickers. I was super focused on picking berries. I had no idea how far away I was from everyone else. All of a sudden, it got really quiet. I could barely hear the voices of my family. Then, a giant gust of wind pushed against my back. I turned around and noticed a small hut not too far away from me. It was too big to be a shed, but not big enough to be a full-on house. It was super run down. I remember looking at the hut and being really spooked. Then, out of nowhere, this black cat comes from behind me and rubs up against my leg. I freaked out. The house was already giving me the creeps. And then, this random animal decided to rub up against me. The cat didn't back off like normal cats. It wasn't afraid, it just looked up at me. I kept my eyes on the cat. I swear something about that cat didn't feel right. It was just sitting right beside me. Then, the weirdest thing I've ever seen happened. It's so vivid in my mind. The heavy winds started up again. This random dust devil formed around the cat. I could feel grains of sand brushing up against me. I stepped back. It got really thick for a moment. Then it cleared a bit and began to move. The cat was nowhere to be seen, but the dust devil slowly made its way to the hut. I felt like the wind was pushing me in the dust devil's direction. Part of me wanted to follow it. It floated right into the hut. I don't know why, but the hut felt so welcoming for a moment. I really wanted to go check it out. I started walking toward it, but then I heard my name being called. My sister and cousins were looking for me. They came up to me and I told them all about what I had seen. Nobody believed me, but at the same time, nobody wanted to go check out the hut. They all got creepy vibes from it. Look, I'm not saying there's a witch at Apple Hill trying to kidnap kids, but there is definitely a witch at Apple Hill trying to kidnap kids. Story 21. I've experienced a few creepy things, but most are usually explainable. However, the clearest one I've had was a few years back. It wasn't even that creepy for me, as I kind of enjoy the idea of ghosts, etc. I was just getting out of the shower in the evening. It must have been winter as it was dark. I live in a London suburb, so all the houses are extremely close and relatively narrow, but the walls are quite thick, and I barely hear my neighbors. My house is also fairly old. My parents were downstairs with the front room door shut. Basically, the upstairs was dead quiet. Usually, my mum puts the radio on in their bedroom, but not this time. Anyway, I'm scrubbing my hair with a towel, and I'm about to put it away in my parents' room. I open the door, walk into the pitch-black room, and suddenly hear a somewhat posh woman's voice say, "Hello?" It was as if I scared her. I stopped, staring into the dark, and replied, "Hello?" 2. Nothing. The woman sounded nothing like my mum or any of my female neighbors. The radio was off, the double-glazed, quiet-as-hell windows were completely shut. I stood there for 5 minutes, waiting for any other sound, but heard literally nothing else. But her voice was extremely clear and directional too. I could tell it came from the back left of the room, by a wardrobe. I was staring right there as I walked in. I thought it was quite a nice experience if it was actually a ghost, because she wasn't threatening at all. My mum reckoned she was one of the people from a large family who lived there a century ago, and somehow me opening the door went back in time and scared her, like I was her ghost. I feel bad if that's the case. Story 22. I have an uncle who always went on weekend hunting trips by himself. I don't know how far into the wilderness he went because it was only squirrel hunting, but it was always 3 to 4 days out in the woods alone. About 4 years ago, he stopped going alone and came back early from one of his trips after he swore he saw a little boy running around and playing in the woods. He only goes in larger 5 to 6 person parties now, always buddies with someone, and never stays as long. I want to add that the spots he went to were off-road mountain spots. These were pretty far from things like campsites, etc. I mean, I don't know. I believe he saw something, just don't know what. I should have added what he claimed happened, so here you guys go. He was walking around trying to find a good spot to sit and wait when he claims he heard what seemed to be a little boy laughing. He kind of paused and looked around, scanning the trees, etc. Then, in the distance, he said he saw this boy just run across this forested area. He swears it had to be a boy because the boy was wearing a blue jacket. He said it was just a brief moment, like a few seconds, but it looked like the boy was playing hide-and-seek or something. He said he immediately got this bad feeling. He kept staring at the spot, but the boy was gone after a brief moment. he turned around and started walking back. My uncle was certain it wasn't just campers or another hunter with his kid, because in all his years of hunting at that spot, he's never run into anybody else. I think that's the more likely option, but I don't know. I also wanted to add the fact that this was a pretty major event for him. He's been hunting his entire life and is pretty used to trips alone. It's not like he's a guy who jumps at random noises in the forest. Story 23. I've been a hunter in South Louisiana since I could hold a gun, and I started hunting alone when I was about 7 years old. One early morning, not long after I had started going alone, around 5:30 a.m., I heard this awful scream no more than 20 yards away from me. I'd compare it to a teenage girl being hurt. At first, I thought it was a screech owl, so I wasn't as scared as I should have been. Luckily, I never did see what made the sound. Fast forward about 2 weeks, I'm riding in our family vehicle with my parents, and we see this huge animal in the road. Too big to be a dog, too small to be a bear. Then I saw the long tail and a cat's face, and realized it was a black panther. Fast forward a few years, out of curiosity, some friends and I looked up different mating calls of animals. That's when I realized that I was within 20 yards of a very angry black panther as a 7-year-old kid. My parents have forgotten about the incident on the road, but it's etched into my brain. For years, apparently, the Louisiana government has been denying that black panthers are present in our state. Story 24. I was playing on my computer, which is upstairs in my house. My wife had gone out for the night with her sisters. My dog started going crazy, which made me think my wife had pulled up in the driveway. I waited to hear her get to the front door and come inside, but my dogs kept barking for a couple of minutes. I got a little worried, so I decided to see what the fuss was about. My dogs were located at the top of the stairs and barking down toward the front door. As I turned the corner to go downstairs, I spotted a figure looking upstairs in the darkness. I yelled, "What the heck?" and ran to get my phone in my office. As I got my phone, my dogs went crazy. They frantically tried to back up on the wood floor and just spun their wheels. I looked at them, and their heads followed movement coming up the stairs and over the railing into the guest bedroom. My dogs repositioned themselves and were looking within the bedroom. My dogs are absolute sweethearts. My boy Walter had his fangs out in a way I've never seen, like a wolf. My girl Ellie, around 9 months old, was barking as hard as she could while trembling. I stood there in shock at their reactions, when all of a sudden, a noise very similar to the buffering noise experienced in a car with only 1 or 2 windows rolled down started. That went on for maybe 15 seconds. Once it stopped, my dogs stopped barking as well and ran into the guest room looking for something. We've had weird things happen in our house, but this was the worst. What made the night even more awful was that I was mocked by my wife and her sisters when I asked her to come. She believes me now, but at the time, it was horrible. Story 25. When I was little, my mom had redecorated my room entirely with Teletubbies. Literally, curtains, lamps, sheets, stickers. Every single thing was Teletubbies themed, because I used to be obsessed with them. I had these gigantic, lifelike pillows of each of the Teletubbies that I'd sleep with every night. I used to sleep with my door open because I was scared of the dark. Well, one night I started seeing colorful figures the size of the pillows I'd sleep with in my doorway, and I would scream to my mom crying. She'd come running in, asking what's wrong, and I'd tell her I'd seen colorful figures in the hallway. She would reassure me it was nothing and lay with me until I went back to sleep. It started happening every night. I'd see colorful figures, or figures that looked exactly like the pillows, standing in my doorway, and I would scream and cry. Finally, my mom got rid of everything and gave it all to a family friend, because I never had that happen to me before, and they offered to take it. After that, I never had the problem again. I honestly forgot about it all after that. She redid my room, and she figured maybe the whole theme was just scaring me for whatever reason. A few years passed, and it came up in a conversation with me and my mom. I had completely forgotten anything about this until this thread. We were talking about how I had that whole Teletubby room, and then she told me about where the stuff went. The family friend, at the time there were 6 people living in that house, had 2 family members who were special needs. They were stress babies, so although they could function normally and have normal conversations, they kind of had the mind of a child and couldn't really live on their own. Anyway, my mom said that after they got my old Teletubbies life-size pillows and things, weird stuff started happening at their house too. They said they started seeing figures in the basement, which was where the special needs girls' room was. It was converted into a nice bedroom and had all of my old bedroom stuff in it. They started seeing figures, and weird stuff would happen. Radios turning on and off when they were unplugged. TVs changing channels by themselves. Finding random things moved when they knew no one touched them. Hearing weird noises and seeing strange things. It was really weird. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but one day the house randomly caught on fire. And there was a little girl over at the house that the family was watching. She ended up dying in the fire because she ran back into the closet when everyone was trying to get her to jump out. It was really tragic. I remember meeting her days before she died and was just shocked to hear the news. It's just so weird to me that all of that happened after they got my old Teletubbies stuff. I'm sure it had nothing to do with it, but I'm just connecting how strange it was that all of it happened right after they got my things. Story 26. Small college town. I was 19. Not much to do besides waste time walking around Walmart. We'd periodically try to scare ourselves. The town was known for having a high number of witches, and as such, finding abandoned places and even altars wasn't too uncommon. Anyways, one of the easiest ways to scare ourselves was to go into the sewers downtown. They were big enough for 6 people or so to walk shoulder to shoulder through and slanted down into ankle-deep water throughout. It was a maze down there with creepy graffiti, small chambers with altars, and sometimes the leftovers of a sacrifice. Every now and then, you'd run into other groups of people, and you'd want to hide. The last time I ever went, I was in a group of 5. We were pretty far into the maze, maybe had been exploring for 2 hours, when we heard a small group approaching us. We found a small pile of rocks about 4 feet in height and 10 feet or so wide to hide behind, and waited for the group to approach. We turned off our flashlights and could see firelight begin to approach the hallway we'd come from, and slashing sounds increased in volume. There were 3 people, wearing all black. One had a torch that was on fire. Think Indiana Jones temple vibes. They came to about 20 feet from our hiding pile and turned to the concrete wall. With all 5 of us watching, the guy with the torch walked toward the wall, put his hand on it, and the wall folded in and parted for them. It was loud and heavy-sounding, like you'd imagine a solid concrete door to sound. It seemed mechanical in its opening, and he definitely didn't need force to do it. The 3 people walked inside, and it closed behind them. After trying to figure out what we had seen, we went to the wall, and there was no opening. No bends, no places for it to open, not even any divots in the concrete. It was a solid block, even though we'd all seen otherwise. We felt all over that wall for anything, even imitated what the guy had done. And yet, nothing. We all walked back out without saying a word, and to this day, I have no idea what the heck I saw. But I know 4 other people watched it with me. Story 27. When I was 9, I lived in a trailer with my mother, stepfather, brother, and sister. We were always scaring each other, jumping out from the bedroom doorways when anybody came down the hall. I was always super jumpy when I walked down the hallway. I hated to walk into my bedroom in the dark, so I would reach in and flip the light on first before entering. One time, I reached in for the light switch, and somebody grabbed my hand. It scared me so bad, I screamed and ran to the living room. I figured my brother or sister waited for me in the bedroom and got me. When I ran into the living room, my mom asked why I screamed. I wanted to say either Lori, David, or my stepfather grabbed me, but everybody was in the living room with Mom. I couldn't even tell my mom what happened. I just started crying. I have seen things in my life that still make the hair on my neck stand on end when I think about them, but that was the only time there was contact. Something grabbed me. It wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. It wasn't in my head. It was a hand snatching my own as I nearly lost it. I'm 46 now, and this still brings tears to my eyes. Story 28. We lived in a very big house with greenery around it. The house was surrounded by a compound wall. The whole house, including bedrooms, was on ground level. No floors or multiple stories. So our backyard was literally between some of our rooms. When I was a teenager, there was a black cat that would come from who knows where. It would come after twilight and sit in our backyard. My room's window opened right there. I swear it used to smile when our eyes met. It's the most creepy thing to witness. I could see all its teeth when it smiled. Later, I realized that the cat only stayed every day until it could see and smile at me. I freaked out and told my mother, who laughed at me and said I was being silly. I was helpless. I couldn't prove it because the cat never smiled in front of anyone except me. One night, my mom told me in a very frightened voice, "You are right. I saw it smile at you." It turned out somehow my mom was in the kitchen, just right opposite my room when it happened. And from a good angle, she saw the cat doing that. Not only that, but if I didn't step out of the room, it would wait for hours to see and smile at me. After the evening my mom saw it smile, the cat did not return. My mom knows. She saw it. But it's hard to prove to anyone. I have had tons of paranormal experiences since my childhood, but this one just creeps me out the most. Story 29. I will preface this by saying I do not believe in supernatural things. I only deal in logic, reason, and evidence. But this one freaked me out. There is a trailer situated right on the edge of my property line that gets rented out semi-regularly. One winter, the people moved out and left a light on in the back bedroom, which shined blue through the blinds. I always go outside at night to let my dog do his business, so I saw this blue light nightly for 3 days. The landlords came through, inspected, and cleaned the place out, and I went out there expecting it to obviously be off now that they had gone in and seen it. But that night, it was still on. Months passed, and this light was always on every night without fail. I stood there with my dog, and it was literally the only thing to look at from the vantage point of my backyard. I began to walk to the edge of my property, which is about 10 feet from the trailer, and did a casual hard stare in that direction, trying to figure out if it was a blue lamp, night light, or what. I couldn't tell anything from that distance. Nearly 6 months passed, and I couldn't take it anymore. Every night I saw it for over 100 nights. My curiosity overshadowed my desire not to be seen peeking into a trailer in the middle of the night. From a distance, the blinds looked messed up, and sure enough, there was a big crease that I could see through. I saw that the blue light was from a TV left on the AV1 input screen, which is solid blue. I could also see in the room now, and there was plastic everywhere on the floor, and a creepy broken doll lying there. For some reason, that gave me such a weird and creeped-out feeling that I remember calling my friend to come over. But they were busy. I didn't tell them why because I couldn't explain it. So I got in bed and put on some Futurama to try and shake that feeling. Eventually, I did and fell asleep. At about 4 a.m., I woke up to solid blue in my eyes. I kind of just stared at it, trying to figure out what the heck this super bright blue light was doing in my eyes when I was trying to sleep. Not even awake enough to feel scared yet.